Check, check. All right, we're in business. We're going to go ahead and get started. We still have a few people signing in, but we have a limited amount of time, so let's go ahead and get started. My name is Pete Van Hardesveld. I'm a staff attorney with the House Committee on Standards of Official Conduct, and welcome to the committee's ethics training on campaign activity. With me this morning are my colleagues Susan Olson, who is one of the committee's staff attorneys, just like me, and also our staff director and chief counsel, Bill O'Reilly. As you know, at the beginning of this Congress, there was a requirement imposed that all House staff receive ethics training on a calendar year basis. So hopefully everybody here got their ethics training done for 2007. During 2007, what we did was we presented a general ethics, sort of an overview course to all House staff. This year we're doing things a little bit differently. We're providing more specialized training, more detailed training on certain subject matters, hence our training on campaign activity. We also expect to be providing training on various other topics. Was it next week we're going to do gifts and travel, or is it? March. In March we'll be doing a presentation on gifts and travel. Anyway, this training does count towards your annual training requirement. Congratulations to you for getting this done in February. We appreciate that at the committee, that's for sure. You're welcome to attend other training sessions during the course of the year if you want. If you're an ethics buff or a glutton for punishment, you're welcome to do that. Critical thing is you must sign in order to get credit. I think based on the line that I saw there, it looks like everybody did that, but if not, make sure you sign in on the way out. Last year, you may recall, we provided certificates to everybody who attended these training sessions. We're not doing that this year. It's the sign-in sheet that is all important, so make sure that you've signed in. Okay. These are the topics that I'll be talking about today. The basic rules on campaign activity, including the most basic rule of them all, which is that we don't do campaign activity out of any house, room, or office. I'll also be talking about attending campaign events. So, for example, if you're offered free attendance at a fundraiser or some campaign event, when can you accept free attendance at such an event under the gift rule? We're talking about travel that you might be taking courtesy of a campaign, travel paid for by a campaign. When can you accept that? Solicitations and receipt of campaign contributions, including the very important rule that we can never solicit a campaign contribution from any house, room, or office. Be talking briefly about campaign stationery and also the use of campaign funds. By the way, pretty much everything that I'm going to talk about today can be found in the committee's campaign activity booklet. Hopefully some of you are familiar with the campaign activity booklet. Actually, this booklet is about to be superseded, hopefully within the next month or so, by an updated House Ethics Manual, House Ethics Manual for 2008, and there will be a chapter in that publication dedicated to campaign activity that's going to supersede this. So if you have any questions about any of the things that I talk about today, take a look at our website. The campaign activity booklet is on our website. You can read about these things there, or as always, you can call us and talk to one of our staff as well. And we also probably will have time to take a question or two during the course of the presentation here. All right, the rules on campaign activity for the most part, always apply. The rules on campaign activity apply to both members and staff alike. For the most part, there is sort of one narrow exception that applies to members when it comes to solicitation of campaign contributions in a house, room, or office. I'll talk about that a little bit later. The rules also apply in election and non-election years. Doesn't matter whether we're in an election year or not. The rules also apply to both paid campaign staff and volunteer campaign staff. And the rules also apply to any campaign, whether it's a congressional campaign, a presidential campaign, or a state or local campaign. With one caveat, when I talk about FEC rules, for the most part, FEC rules apply to federal campaigns only. All right, let's start with rule number 1, and that is that no campaign activity can take place in any congressional office or room. I think everybody is at least a little bit familiar with that rule. It includes, all the rooms, your personal office, committee office, hallways, public spaces, any place here on the House campus here in D.C. Also applies to district offices as well. What types of activities are prohibited? Anything really that's campaign related. Meetings, strategy sessions about the election, meetings of campaign staff, fundraising, certainly. There's a criminal statute that prohibits that. Filling out FEC forms, maintaining the campaign website, creating point papers or other materials for use by the campaign. All of these things are prohibited. Distributing campaign paraphernalia, even wearing or displaying campaign paraphernalia in a House office, all of those things are prohibited. When a member of the general public walks into your House office, it should not be immediately apparent to them whether it is a Republican or Democratic office. All right. Rule number 2, no House resources may be used for campaign purposes. That includes the obvious things like, the fax, the phone, copiers, paper, pens, etc., all of the stuff that's been paid for with House funds. But also the less obvious things. Really anything that was created using House funds can't be used for campaign purposes. Things like photos, all right, any photograph that was taken by a House staffer on House time, or any photograph that was taken with a camera that was paid for with House funds. That photo is considered House property and may not be used for campaign purposes. It may be that your member has a favorite photo of himself or herself that they want to use for campaign purposes. If that photo is, again, taken with a House camera or by House staff, that's House property and cannot be used for campaign purposes. If you really want to transfer that photo to the campaign office, there's sort of a complicated and cumbersome way to do that. And if you contact us, we can tell you how to do that. It involves a payment by the campaign for the photo. No use of any House offices for campaign photos. A picture of the member sitting behind his desk in his House office. All right, no House office or rooms can be used for any campaign purposes, so any photo of the member in a House office cannot be used for campaign purposes. The dome, by the way, is considered to be sort of in the public domain. That's something that may be used for campaign purposes, but interior offices cannot. Your mailing list, your House mailing list, that's considered a House resource, cannot be used for campaign purposes. According to the rules of the Committee on House Administration, a mailing list may not be shared with the member's campaign committee, any other campaign entity, or otherwise be used for campaign purposes. Same goes for your internal House files, your casework files, subject matter files. Those are for House purposes only and shouldn't be used for shouldn't be used by the campaign staff. Pursuant to House rules, video of floor or committee proceedings may not be used for campaign purposes. All right, so there shouldn't be any sort of video of the member on the House floor that appears on his or her campaign website. Of course, outside organizations are free to access, C-SPAN footage. Those types of that footage is not copyrighted and can and will be used by outside organizations, but it should not be used on your member's campaign website. Anything else created with House resources, point papers, your member's official biography, those are considered to be House resources. Okay. As with all general rules, of course, we have some limited exceptions. And these are sort of common sense exceptions that allow, some sort of campaign-related activity to take place in a House office. For example, the scheduler. It's okay for the scheduler to maintain a liaison with his or her counterpart on the campaign side, just to make sure that the member's not double booked. The campaign scheduler can maintain a schedule that includes both House events on it and campaign events. That schedule is for internal House use only. It shouldn't appear on the member's official website, but it's okay for the scheduler to do that. What the scheduler should not be doing is the actual scheduling of campaign events. That should be done by the campaign scheduler. There's also an exception that applies to our press person. If a reporter is in a House office conducting an interview on officially related matters, legislation, or something along those lines, an incidental question or two is asked about the campaign, it's okay to answer those, that one or three questions about the campaign. You don't have to throw up your hands and run off the House campus in order to answer those. But if, on the other hand, the interview is about the campaign or about FEC filings or about something that's specifically election-related, that interview should be referred to the campaign office. Referrals to the campaign, obviously the general public doesn't always understand the distinction between the House office and the campaign office, and you're going to get emails, letters, phone calls in the House office that really belong or should go to the campaign office, and it's okay to refer those on. Somebody calls on the phone and wants to volunteer for the campaign. You can say, you've reached the official House office. The phone number you should call is, and provide the phone number to the campaign office. That's perfectly fine. With respect to mail that is intended for the campaign, it's a good idea to keep a supply of campaign-paid envelopes in the House office, and you can stuff those letters in those campaign-paid envelopes and forward those on to the campaign that way. You can't frank any sort of referral onto the campaign office. Question we've been getting a lot of here recently is, you'll get phone calls asking superdelegate questions. Those questions should be referred to the campaign office. Should not respond to those out of the House office. All right, another sort of limited exception here to our general rule is providing official materials to the campaign. A good way to think about this is treat your campaign just like you would any other constituent. If the campaign should call and say, hey, listen, what is your member's position on guns? And you've got an off-the-shelf product that sets forth the member's position on guns that you routinely provide to constituents, you can provide that to the campaign office just like you would anybody else. What you shouldn't do, as I said earlier, is allow a representative from the campaign office to access the member's House files, internal House files. A secondary question becomes, well, once the campaign office has this product, what can they do with it? Generally speaking, the House or the campaign office should use this House product in creating their own product. So if, going back to my example on the point paper on guns, the campaign office can use that in creating their own point paper, but it shouldn't appear word for word on both the House website and the campaign website. Need to look out for that. One sort of exception to this rule is for press releases. It is permissible for a campaign office to post on its website, word for word, a press release issued by the House office, but that posting should take place after what we say the official use of the press release has been exhausted. That's deemed to be about 3 days. All right. In posting this House press release on the campaign website, the campaign office should remove the official indicia from this product. Take the House seal off, the letterhead, any sort of House phone numbers or points of contact. Any questions on that? Yes, sir. That's correct. Yeah, the question was the press secretary's name, does that need to be removed from the press release? The answer to that question is yes, it should be removed. Yes, sir. Yeah, the question is, can the campaign press secretary add their name to the press release? And I think we would find that to be permissible. I think that's okay. Okay. What if it's the same person? I think that would be okay, but make sure that there's no House phone number on there. Okay, campaign-related House communications. From time to time, you will get questionnaires from outside organizations that are interested in the member's position on legislative matters or certain issues. It is okay to respond to these inquiries as long as the content of your response will be frankable in content. So really, at the end of the day, this is a franking question, and you should contact the Franking Commission if you have any questions along these lines. The Committee on House Administration also administers the 90-day mass communications ban, or this ban on mass communications within 90 days of an election. And questions on that should also be referred to the Committee on House Administration. Yes, ma'am. The question, as I understand it, is if the content will not be frankable in content, is it okay for the press secretary to answer that off campus on their own time? Well, or any member of the staff? Yes, as long as it's not using House resources, not on House time. Basically, you're looking at a referral to the campaign office of this correspondence, that would be permissible. Okay, we're going to shift gears here. We just talked about the general prohibition on campaign work in a House office and some exceptions. Now we're going to talk about the rules that apply to campaign work by House staff that is performed outside the House office on their own time. All right, generally it is, campaign work on one's own time outside the House office is permissible. You should, however, if you're interested in doing this, make sure that you obtain your supervisor's permission. As always, as with any outside activity, your employing member has a say or has the right to know what you're involved with on the outside. Certainly, if you're going to be involved in the campaign of your member's opponent, that's something that he'd be very interested in knowing. Probably not a career-enhancing move on your part either, I might add. Okay, your campaign work, if you're interested in doing campaign work, must be done on your own time. What is your own time? Typically, we're talking about evenings, weekends. Your annual leave is considered your own time. Some folks during campaign season will find they want to go into a part-time status with the House. That's perfectly fine as long as there's a corresponding reduction in your House salary. Some folks will go into leave without pay status as well, and time that you're in a LWOP status is also, of course, considered your own time. If you do go into a part-time status during the campaign season, what we recommend is that to the maximum extent practicable, you keep a regular schedule. Monday, Wednesday, Fridays are my House days, and Tuesdays and Thursdays are my campaign days. That way, when your opponent sees you out there on the campaign trail on a Thursday, you can say, hey, listen, Thursday is my campaign day. It makes it very easy to deflect that possible charge. Campaign work has to be voluntary. All right, nobody should be forced to do campaign work. If you're being forced to do campaign work, that is an improper condition of House employment. And if you're having problems with that, I would suggest you give us a call or give the Office of Compliance a call, which is the House's Employee Grievance Office. All right, campaign work can be paid or unpaid. All right, if you go into a part-time status, or even if you don't, it's perfectly fine to accept compensation from both the House and from the campaign. For those of you who are senior staff, you may remember that you have an annual outside earned income limit. What is senior staff currently? That is folks making $114,468 or above. Those folks have an outside earned income limit of $25,000 and change. So, income that you earn from the campaign counts towards that limit. I'm sorry? Can I repeat the whole point? Yeah, senior staff is, you're deemed to be senior staff if you were paid at the rate of $114,468 or above. For purposes of the outside earned income limit, it's for a 90-day period. Paid at that rate of pay for a 90-day period. Okay. Senior staff are also subject to certain fiduciary restrictions. Senior staff are prohibited from accepting compensation for certain things, including acting in a fiduciary capacity on behalf of an outside organization. So this would prohibit the receipt of compensation for things by senior staff for things like acting as treasurer or counsel for a campaign organization. Okay, no contributions to one's employing member. Why is that? Well, it's in statute, 18 U.S.C. Section 603, in case you're interested. Why do we have such a law? I think this can be viewed as sort of an anti-kickback kind of law. Avoid an unscrupulous member from perhaps saying, I will bump up your house salary by $2,000 if you give $1,000 of it to my campaign. All right, so we are prohibited from making contributions to our employing member. We are also prohibited from making outlays on behalf of our employing member's campaign. So, for example, you go to the stationery store to buy a ream of paper. You use your own money to purchase that. Even if you're going to be reimbursed by the campaign, that's impermissible, and that's going to be considered to be a campaign contribution to your employing member, which is, again, prohibited by statute.
The travel expenses are okay? You pay for your own hotel and to the university?
Yeah, the question was, well, what about outlays for your own personal travel expenses? That's the next bullet on the slide here. That is permissible to do that. You must be reimbursed by the campaign within 30 days or 60 days if you paid by credit card, or your total expenses, your total travel expenses have to be less than $1,000. Who is your employing member? For those of you who work in a personal office, that's pretty easy to figure out. If you work in a committee office or if you're a shared staffer, part of your money comes from a committee office. Your employing member, if you are a majority staffer, will be the chairman of the committee. If you are a minority staffer, it will be the ranking minority member of the committee and also the chairman. Although most minority staff on committee offices wouldn't be in a position to make a contribution to the chairman. Occasionally we get the question about, well, what about contributions to other members? That's perfectly fine. Contributions to presidential candidates, that's perfectly fine. Contributions to multi-candidate PACs, that's fine as well, as long as your contribution is not earmarked in any way towards your employing member. Okay, next point. Tickets to campaign events. You may find during the campaign season that you are invited to attend certain campaign events. As you may recall from the general training that you attended last year, there is an exception to the gift rule that allows us to accept free attendance at campaign events, subject to a couple of restrictions. The first is the event needs to be sponsored by a Section 527 organization. What's a Section 527 organization? That is a section of the Internal Revenue Code that pertains to campaign organizations. We're talking about PACs, state party organizations, those types of things. Any sort of entity that is operated for the purpose of accepting contributions or making expenditures to influence an election, that's a 527 organization. All right, so the event has to be sponsored by a 527 organization, and secondly, the invitation must come to you from that organization, not the third-party table buyer. All right. As long as you have those two things present, you can accept free attendance. Regardless of the face value of the ticket, you can eat whatever food everybody else is eating, and you'll be good to go. Other exceptions to the gift rule may occasionally permit you to accept free attendance at campaign events also. For example, as you recall, we can accept food or refreshment of a nominal value offered as other than part of a meal. So if it's a reception, for the most part, you're going to be able to go. If it's let's say, for example, you have a brother who is active in political matters, and your brother has bought some tickets to a political fundraiser and has offered you a ticket. As you recall from the general training, we can accept gifts without limitations from family members. So you would be able to accept a gift, this gift of free attendance at this event from your brother. So don't forget about the other exceptions to the gift rule that might apply as well. Questions on attendance at events? Yeah, the question is, well, what if the event is not sponsored by a Section 527 organization? Then this exception to the gift rule is just not going to apply. It may be that some other exception applies, like I said, the gifts from a family member or food and refreshment of a nominal value. But generally speaking, it needs to be sponsored by 527. Yes, sir. Yes, these are the same rules that will apply to the convention. There is sort of a special rule that pertains to members attending events held during the political conventions that are held in their honor, and the committee has a pink sheet on that, and if you're interested in that, I would refer you to that pink sheet. One more question. Yes, sir. The question is, what if you are a delegate to the convention? What, can you go to the convention? Is that your question? Yeah, can you attend the associated events? I think we'd have to take a look at look at the events event by event and sort of make a call on that. Interesting question. Talk to us about that one afterwards. Okay, moving right along. Travel paid for by a political organization. You may find that you're invited to go someplace fun, maybe not, courtesy of a campaign organization here during the campaign season. There is an exception to the gift rule that allows us to accept travel paid for by, again, a 527 organization. This type of travel is not considered officially connected travel, so therefore it's not subject to review and approval by the Committee on Standards. Now, you may be familiar with that procedure for officially connected travel. Does not apply for campaign paid travel. No need to file the post-travel disclosure form at the Legislative Resource Center for this type of travel either. If you file an annual financial disclosure statement, typically we're talking about members and senior staff here, and this travel is not reported to the FEC by the sponsoring organization, then you would need to disclose that on your financial disclosure statement. And mostly this boils down to campaign travel paid for by state or local political organizations. All right, what about campaign activity during official travel? You're on a CODEL or some house-paid travel. Is it okay for you to engage in campaign activity along the way? These rules are actually Committee and House Administration rules, and if you have questions on this, I would refer you to the Committee and House Admin. But generally, their rules state, as you see here on the slide, official house-paid travel obviously cannot be for campaign purposes. The primary purpose of the trip has to be for some official, official reason. In addition, according to House Admin rules, official travel may not begin or end at a campaign event. It is our understanding, however, that incidental campaign activity that occurs along the way is permitted, but again, the primary purpose of the trip has to be official in order to use House funds. Question also arises is what about campaign activity during the course of officially connected, privately sponsored travel? And this is the travel that is reviewed and approved by the Committee on Standards, travel paid for by some outside organization, a fact-finding trip, whatever. This can implicate FEC rules, and in this circumstance, we would advise you to contact the FEC. It may be that if this campaign activity is significant, these travel benefits that you have been provided may be deemed to be an in-kind campaign contribution or possibly even a prohibited in-kind campaign contribution. So before you engage in any campaign activity during the course of officially connected, privately sponsored travel, contact the FEC. All right. Questions on travel before I talk about soliciting campaign contributions? Okay. As I mentioned earlier, there is a federal criminal statute that prohibits the solicitation of political contributions in House office buildings, the Capitol or district office. Actually, it applies to all federal offices. The statute prohibits not only, making a solicitation phone call from a House office, but also prohibits making a solicitation phone call to a House office, all right? So it is a pretty broad statute in its application. Occasionally we'll get somebody who gets the idea, well, here's what I'll do. I'll take my personal cell phone and I'll go off into, the hallway and I'll make my fundraising calls from there. That doesn't work. All right? Any place on the House campus is prohibited here. All right? No solicitations any place on the House campus. There is one sort of narrow exception to this rule, and you see it there on your slide. Member-to-member solicitations are allowed on the House campus as long as they don't take place on the House floor or in its adjoining rooms. And there's a House rule that prohibits that specifically. But generally speaking, member-to-member solicitations are okay. You shouldn't even really know about those or be involved in those. This is just member-to-member kind of activity. Yes. Question is this you're talking about member-to-member solicitations? Can it be written as well as verbal? I think it can be written as long as the writing is not on House stationery or wasn't written by House staff or otherwise using House resources. You good with that, Susan?
Yeah. What happens, if a member has a fundraising or a solicitation letter, what they'll want to do, is hand it out to fellow members, and as long as it's not on the House floor, the adjoining rooms, and as long as there were no House resources used to put that mailing together, then the general opinion has been that the members are allowed to hand that out, but to the member. They can't say, hand it out to a chief of staff or something like that. It has to be member to member, personal contact.
All right, one other point on solicitations here. There is another federal criminal statute that is not well known and occasionally disregarded that prohibits the solicitation of campaign contributions from other federal employees. So if you're going to be doing campaign work that involves soliciting contributions, you should not be soliciting your fellow House employees or any federal employee for that matter. Last but not least, of course, we should never use any official House resources in soliciting campaign contributions. Any other? Yes, ma'am. Member-to-member solicitation on the office phone.
That would be a use of House resources. Improper.
One more question. No. The question is, can a campaign staffer come into the House buildings and drop off a written solicitation to another member? No, that would not be considered member-to-member solicitation. That's not going to work. Yes, ma'am.
If a former staff member is now running for office, can you get, can you go with that offer to
Yeah, the question is, there's a former staffer who's running for office. Is it okay to make a campaign contribution to them? Yeah, if they're no longer a federal employee, they are not subject to this limitation on, or are they? I'm not sure about that. I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. Yes, yes. Assuming that they're not your employing member, campaign contribution would be fine. Okay. All right, receipt of campaign contributions in a House office. Despite our best efforts, occasionally somebody's going to show up at your doorstep with a campaign contribution, or they're going to mail one into the House office. What do you do about that? Well, if they show up in the House office in person with a contribution, don't accept it. All right, just refer them, give them the address to the campaign office, and refer them there. If it shows up in the mail, it is okay to accept that in the House office as long as it is forwarded to the campaign office within 7 days. All right, you've got a strict 7-day rule here. In forwarding this contribution onto the campaign office, no House resources should be used beyond the staff time required. All right, the frank can't be used for this. Again, it's a good idea to have some campaign paid-for envelopes in the House office for that purpose. Or you can have somebody on their personal time during their lunch hour or whatever delivered to the campaign office. Yes, ma'am.
As long as you use campaign envelopes and stamps, and if it comes into the mail, possibly is that the right person to do, or does it have to be all?
Yeah, question is, can you just throw these referrals into the regular mail, or do you have to take them down to the post office? Regular mail is okay, says Susan. I think that's right. I'm good with that. Let's go with it.
Your past practices.
Yes. Yeah, the question is, if somebody shows up personally with a campaign contribution, can you walk with them off campus and then accept the check? I would say that's not a good practice, simply because you'd be using house time, of course, in order to walk off campus. The de minimis amount of house time to give them, write down the campaign office address is fine, but walking off campus and accepting it out there, that's no good. All right, one more question. Yes, sir. Can you give them a campaign envelope to send it to the campaign? I think that would be permissible. Okay. One more point on receipt of campaign contributions, of course, and everybody should know this from their general training that they received last year. We should never accept any gift or any campaign contribution that is some way linked to the performance of some official duty. So the campaign contribution shows up in the mail with a letter that says, "Thank you so much for helping me with my immigration casework matter. Here's a check for $100 to the campaign committee." All right, that contribution needs to be returned to the donor. Or a contribution that says, "Here's $100. How about you vote yes on HR whatever." Obviously that contribution needs to be returned as well. Acceptance of contributions along these lines may implicate the criminal statutes on bribery and illegal gratuities. All right, a few words now on campaign stationery. All right, it should be obvious to somebody looking at your house stationery and looking at your campaign stationery that the two are different. There is a rule, it's House Rule 23, Clause 11, called the facsimile rule that prohibits the use on campaign stationery of the words Congress of the United States or House of Representatives. So those words should not appear on your campaign stationery unless it's in the context of Smith for United States House of Representatives. Also, your campaign stationery should not use the House seal. The House seal is actually protected by federal statute. You can actually do time for misusing the House seal, so don't use the House seal on your campaign stationery. Also, may not use your congressional office address or phone number on the campaign stationery. I think it's. I'll just keep talking here. I think it's even a good idea, not to use the same sort of, Gothic script that you typically see on house stationery on the campaign stationery. Try to use different lettering. It should be obvious which one's your house stationery and which one's the campaign stationery. There are things that can be put on your campaign stationery, such as the member's personal title, which is always okay. Member of Congress, representative, or congressman or woman. May also use the member's title as chair or ranking member of a full committee. A House leadership position is also considered to be part of one's personal title. That can also be used on campaign stationery. You can mention committee assignments, may identify the member's district, and may also use an image of the Capitol Dome. Again, the Capitol Dome is considered sort of in the public domain, and that's good to go for campaign stationery. The FEC does have rules on disclaimers that need to be on campaign stationery. Those are outside our jurisdiction. I would contact the FEC if you have questions along those lines. And obviously, last but not least, we should not be mailing letters on campaign stationery from the House office. You know, aside from those campaign paid envelopes that we use for referrals to the campaign office, we shouldn't be really sending anything out of the House office that's on campaign stationery. All right, the next topic I'm going to cover is the proper use of campaign funds. Both the Standards Committee and the FEC actually have jurisdiction over the use of campaign funds. You might find that surprising. But if you take a look at House Rule 23, Clause 6, there is a section in there about the misuse of campaign funds, and it says as follows. It says that a member should not, a member must keep campaign funds separate from personal funds. A member may not convert campaign funds to personal use, and a member may use campaign funds only for bona fide campaign or political purpose. What is a bona fide campaign or political purpose? Members are given pretty wide discretion here, not unfettered, but pretty wide discretion, you know, so things like the mailing of holiday greetings from the campaign office, even though that's not directly related to a campaign or an election, there is a political purpose there, and that's something that is considered to be a valid political purpose and is okay. What we need to look out for is personal use. Again, personal use is specifically prohibited by House rules and also specifically prohibited by FEC rules. And by the way, FEC rules apply to federal campaign funds. The House rules apply to all campaign funds under a member's control. So if the member is running for a state office or something like that, those funds need to be handled in accordance with House rules as well. All right, what is personal use? The FEC has sort of a basic rule that says that, you know, if this is an expense that you would be incurring anyways, whether you were an office holder or a candidate or not, then this is a personal use. Things like your food, your clothing, those things are personal uses. You know, normal living expenses are considered to be personal use. You know, occasional food or meals will be acceptable. It will be, you know, you can use campaign funds, obviously, to purchase a meal at a campaign event or to purchase food for a campaign event, but for the members' daily sort of feeding expenses, that's not going to be permissible. Clothing, shelter, obviously, it's permissible to use campaign funds to pay the rent for the campaign office, but not the member's mortgage. Vacation expenses, you know, the member finishes a grueling campaign and says, oh my gosh, I am just wiped out, I need a vacation. Campaign funds are not going to be available for that purpose. Tickets to shows and sporting events, generally speaking, we can't use campaign funds for that unless it's a bona fide campaign event. Same thing with country club or health dues. Members may never borrow from their campaign account. So the member, you know, needs a new car or something like that. He can't finance that, you know, his personal vehicle through his campaign account. I think that's pretty obvious on its face. One other issue that crops up in the area of personal use is when a member would like to use campaign funds to purchase something that is owned by his family or by him. So, for example, renting the campaign office from a building owned by the member. Generally, that's going to be permissible as long as there's a bona fide campaign need for that item and as long as the payment made is fair market value. But any payment made in excess of fair market value is going to be considered an improper personal use. If your member wants to lease office space from, you know, from a corporation or a building owned by him or his family, this is a situation where I would strongly encourage you to write to the committee for an advisory opinion, because this is something that the press will feast on. Yes, ma'am. Can you use campaign funds for a photographer? I'm not sure I'm following your questions. For house purposes. Yeah, that gets to the use of campaign funds for official house purposes, and my next slide actually pertains to that, and I'll try to address your question then. Is there another question somewhere? Yes, sir.
If you rent, the member rents to his campaign an office space in one of his buildings, and you rent it for $1. You said in excess, but you didn't say.
What I said was fair market value. If he rents it below fair market value, this may be deemed a contribution, might be a permissible contribution, might be okay, I'm just not sure. But fair market value, I think, is a good rule of thumb. Okay. Official use of campaign funds. Is it okay to use campaign funds to support the operations of the House office? Well, the general rule is that campaign funds can be used for some member office, not committee office expenses. Some clearly permissible uses of campaign funds in support of the House office are listed here on this slide. It is okay for the campaign to purchase a handheld communication device like a BlackBerry or a cell phone and use that device for both campaign purposes and House purposes. All right, of course, when the member is in the House office, the device should be used for House purposes, shouldn't be doing campaign work out of the House office, but it does, it's a nice rule because, now the member doesn't have to carry around 2 phones all the time. Same goes for a car. It's okay to use campaign funds to purchase a campaign vehicle and also use that vehicle for House purposes as well. Of course, however, the vehicle should not be used for personal purposes unless reimbursement is made to the campaign. Food at member office events, so for example, an open house out in the district, otherwise paid for and promoted with official House funds, it is okay to use campaign funds to purchase food and beverages in support of that event. If you want to bring in a speaker from out of town to speak at that event, you can use campaign funds for that as well. And also, it's permissible to use campaign funds for official or officially connected travel for the member or for one of his staff. And your question was for photos. Yeah. I don't know. The question is, can you use campaign funds to hire a photographer to take pictures and then use those pictures for House purposes? I'm not sure about that because there are certain uses of campaign funds that are prohibited in House Rule 24, and those are seen on this slide. In particular, mail and other communications. I think those photos might be deemed to be in the world of communications, so I think that might be prohibited. So no use of campaign funds for the following things: mail and other communications, compensation for services. Okay, we can't pay people's salaries, House salaries out of campaign funds. We cannot use campaign funds for office space, furniture, or equipment, except for the handheld communication devices. Any questions on use of campaign funds for House purposes? Yes, ma'am.
If you're using campaign funds for official travel, can your travel qualify for government rate or does it need to be regulated public?
Okay, if you're using campaign funds for official travel, can you use the government rate?
That's a question for House Administration, actually, to answer.
Yeah, I'm not sure the answer to that one, and I would consult the Committee on House Administration since they administer official travel. Other questions? Okay. Susan, Bill, and I will stick around after the presentation to answer any more questions that you might have. Congratulations, it's February. You've now completed your ethics training for the year. And thank you very much for your attention.
Hey, Tanya's here too,
Yeah.
and she's offended.
We're quarterly budget.